I can, yes.
Okay, cool. So I'm Keaton Shaw with GSI. I'm a solutions consultant here, and I've been in the ServiceNow space since about 2013. I've gone through the analysis and RFI, RFP process several times and have implemented ServiceNow as a customer. And for the last 3-4 years, I've been working as a solutions consultant, solutions architect, scoping and implementing ServiceNow for many different clients in many different industries. And my goal here is to provide you sort of our guidance and sort of recommendations on what you could do for your ServiceNow investment to get the most value from it. And the way the webinar is structured is we're going to look at what constitutes and leads to a successful ServiceNow implementation. When you're doing an end-to-end ServiceNow implementations, what are the different phases of the project and how you can best position your organization for success. We'll look at organizational alignment in winning stakeholder support for the project. When you're negotiating on the ServiceNow contracts, licensing, what are the pitfalls and things that you want to consider to have sort of the best product SKUs as well as pricing. And we'll probably spend quite a bit of time on pricing because that's sort of a sensitive area for ServiceNow and for most customers. We're also going to talk about how you can select consulting partners and also a managed services provider and what are different models there. We'll look at how you go through the product and solution design of ServiceNow. How do you work through getting approvals and project funding for various sort of phases of the project, the methodologies and best practices, if you will, that are used in the implementation with your implementation partner. What do you do for the actual deployment before the partners have boots on the ground? And during the deployment, what are the phases that you need to kind of work through and the steps, again, at a high level of how the development cycles will go, your go live and ongoing improvements. So that's sort of the agenda for today. And this is primarily focused for folks that have already gone through their analysis. And so what I'm hoping to do is provide you guidance on if you've already selected ServiceNow as your platform of choice from conducting, due diligence like I had done by going either through an RFI, RFP process, or any type of a vendor bake-off where you've considered this along with other technologies. So from a market perspective, ServiceNow has been a dominant player in the IT service management space and IT operations since about 2004-ish timeframe. It's been on the Magic Quadrant as a top leader chart, as you see here, in the #1 position for the past 7 years. And little by little, release by release, ServiceNow adds functionality, and it expands into businesses of creating a more expansive workflow automations. It creates additional sort of market opportunities in digital transformation that sort of companies are going through with the COVID virus and other sort of market issues. And ServiceNow as an organization is just brought in a new CEO. His name is Bill McDermott, and Bill brings a strong IT and customer-centric view with strong growth history at ServiceNow. There's stock market has really gone up. He had a very successful run at SAP. ServiceNow is sort of the best product is the IT service management suite. That's the Magic Quadrant that you're looking at here. It's followed by BMC and Ivanti. Ivanti is sort of the new kid, if you will, on the block in the leaders quadrant. They just came on the quadrant a few months ago. You can see that this ITSM quadrant was released in October, and they just made it. Ivanti's been on the quadrant for probably 2 or 3 years in the ITSM quadrant, and they have products like Landesk and Heat that they've been building off of, and BMC has Remedy and other products, but ServiceNow is by far ahead of the pack. They also dominate on Magic Quadrants and in the leader position in all of these other areas. So if you're considering risk, vendor risk management, software asset management, CRM type of tools like ServiceNow CSM, agile DevOps tools, integrated risk management for compliance and governance. So ServiceNow has offerings in all of those areas, and they're in the lead position. And you can see the month and the year that they made it onto the Magic Quadrant. Going to the next slide. So this is a broad, sort of a football shape diagram that most ServiceNow presentations will include. If you've not seen it, I'll just do a quick intro, because I assume the people that are on the call have already gone through their analysis and have already selected, like I had said earlier, ServiceNow is their platform of choice for whatever business priorities that they've set for their phase 1 implementations and so forth. The middle part of the circle here are core platform capabilities, and that essentially includes your service portal, knowledge management, mobile interfaces, these workflow type of capabilities, base orchestration, integration type of capabilities. The outside of that circle are individual apps, and the ones that are the text in the red identifies the suite that they belong to. ServiceNow has about a dozen product suites with hundreds of applications. So the product portfolio is very, very broad. And as I had said, most people will start with the IT service management suite of products, including incident, problem, change. And they may include, depending on, again, business priorities, funding, objectives that they have for phase 1. They may include ITOM, IT business management, software asset management, et cetera, as a phase 1 initiative as well. I want to spend a little bit more time going into the detail of this slide. The reason is what ServiceNow has done that is differentiator from the other competitors that were on the Magic Quadrant is ServiceNow has taken a platform-centric direction. Means their futures happen at a platform level, and then additional products and suites will pick up those features and kind of build off of that. And currently we're in the ServiceNow Paris release, and they just if people have not heard, expanded the product offerings with new industry specific solutions. So they've added a service provider, telco, financial services product offerings. So if you're, for example, a bank, and if you're interested in doing credit card, checking account, those type of banking related services or applications, and you want to use ServiceNow as a single consolidated sort of platform where you want to provide and manage those services, and it's also aligned to the banking BN framework or architectural standard. So you can use it for IT operations, HR, CSM, as well as industry-specific offerings, if any of you on the phone call fall into these industries. So in addition to that, another growth area for ServiceNow is to expand its presence into a broader set of countries with the relationship that Big Bill McDermott, again, brings to ServiceNow as a former CEO of SAP. And as of today, I believe ServiceNow's revenue, approximately 75% of it comes from the IT service management space. ServiceNow has a strong CSAT score where 90% of the customers renew on their annual contracts. Currently, they have approximately 6,000 customers in 80% of the Fortune 500 clients. Now, why would somebody take on something like this in terms of, ServiceNow platform? Well, one of the biggest advantage ServiceNow has and its core strength is a unified approach on how the products are built. You're not going to have the swivel chair between, one application to the next and one business unit to the next. So HR, legal, customer service, your IT network infrastructure, all of these people are all working on a single UI. And for administrators, users, customers, they can all work with applications without duplicate data entry. You don't have the swivel chair between a platform or additional systems. Customers don't have to work through purchasing and deploying additional hardware. They don't have to deal with integrations. ServiceNow application stack has basically proven to be, it can serve the smallest clients where you have 20, 30, 40-person company to the large enterprises like IBM with 600,000 employees, KPMG with hundreds of thousands, Yahoo, and it spans all industries. So it can start out very small. And if you're, if your company is positioned in any industry for growth, and if you're going to scale and you want that solution to scale with your company and support your growth, ServiceNow is sort of your product of choice. What also is strong about ServiceNow is the product innovation and the technology partners that it has. So just like an Apple iPhone, ServiceNow has an app store, and you can go to the app store and download hundreds of different ServiceNow apps that are built and offered through the app store that can be downloaded directly onto your instance. Some of them are free and some of them are licensed products. And any places that you see here that are not covered in terms of, for example, barcode scanners, procurement, billing, invoicing, those things can be found from the App Store. So this is not just the product offering. The product offerings is much, much broader when you look at what's offered by the technology partners of ServiceNow. When we look at purchasing ServiceNow, like I had said earlier, most companies will start with the IT Service Management Suite. And there are two sort of variations offered from the IT Service Management side. There's the standard and there's the professional. Most smaller enterprises where ServiceNow has a commercial account and an enterprise account. A commercial account is less than 5,000 employees, and they will start with, as a norm, incident, problem, change, those applications that are listed here. If a company or an organization needs additional things like performance analytics, national language or dynamic translation, or a chatbot that has sort of automated intelligence where they can do an initial first point of contact for incidents and changes or requests. So those features would require the Pro SKU, and that would be the right column. Just like IT Service Management, IT Business Management has the ITBM Standard and Professional. You get the project, demand, resource as in your base SKU. And just like ITSM, if you want the performance analytics, virtual agent, etc., you would have to buy the Pro SKU. Customer Service Management has, again, a similar approach as the other two product suites, ITSM, ITBM. CSM has a lot of product SKUs. It used to be bundled with Civil Services, and with the recent release, it's been separated into two separate product suites. So CSM and Field Services are now licensed separately. You can buy CSM Standard or CSM Pro, and the differentiator with CSM Pro primarily is, again, if you're going to do things like continual service improvement, if you're going to have outsourced customers coming in and work with your internal resources, if there's going to be performance analytics or predictive intelligence or custom enhancements in how CSM is deployed, you'd need the Pro SKU. Field Services is fairly straightforward. You can see when you buy FSM, you get all the apps included, and as more features and products are released, there's a potential that it'll go into FSM Standard and FSM Pro like CSM. ITOM is a product. If people have not used it or are familiar with it, we have other sort of guides on our website that you can go in and look at. But when you're looking at discovery, you can do top-down discovery, horizontal discovery, and those products are bundled into different product suites here. So ITOM visibility, health, and optimization, without going into the details of the product because it'll be a webinar in itself, are licensed by standard, pro, or enterprise. And you can look at the product SKUs to decide if which one makes sense for you. And if you have external integrations like SCCM, SAP, Workday, all of these 30, 40 different connectors that come with the product, and they're called service graph connectors. You would have to buy the various licensing in addition to the base license if you're wanting to do those integrations out of the box versus having to build them custom. And what those integrations include are here. And it's a product called Integration Hub. And again, that has a a starter, standard, professional, enterprise licensing. So you tier up. And those bundles are depending on the number of transactions and the spokes that are included with it. And the spokes are the systems that you're essentially going to be integrated with. So, you have protocols as well as apps, as well as the number of transactions that you're anticipating that'll drive your decision here. And outside of this, you also have another SKU that you would need to purchase if you're interested in doing password reset. So I'll take a pause here. Does anybody have any questions so far before we jump into pricing? Okay, continue on. I'm going to spend probably 5 minutes or a little more maybe talking about pricing, because this is where probably bulk of your, if it's sort of like real estate, it's you make your money not when you sell, but when you buy. I believe it sort of applies in ServiceNow. If you can pick your product suites and phase in your products as well as the licensing, you'll have sort of the best value for your investment for your organization. ServiceNow, if you're a smaller organization, has if you will, a minimum buy-in. So that minimum buy-in is, X number of users that are called fulfillers for ServiceNow licenses for ITSM, ITBM licenses. Now, if you're at the very base minimum, there's an extra value that you can actually gain by doing a hybrid of purchasing licenses in multiple product suites to minimize your spend as well as maximizing your capability, because you can take applications from different product suites and you can deploy it for a more comprehensive solution while still sort of staying close to the minimum spend. And we can talk about that because that's, again, a conversation on its own if anybody's interested. And the other sort of things that I want to get into are the challenges here, where customers, when you're purchasing and implementing new, ITSM tools, what you want to, and when you're talking about the sizable investment and time and money that organizations are going to make, and the planning that it's going to take to realize the benefits, your IT infrastructure and operation leaders can, do the research to maximize your sort of investment. You can avoid unsatisfactory, rollouts and anticipated cost. So ServiceNow pricing in the previous slide, like I showed you, is a little bit complicated and at times unpredictable. And projected value versus actual value that ServiceNow will kind of represent is not always aligned. And you're going to have to do your own sort of homework in coming up with what application suites you're going to need, and the ones that are sold that you purchase basically are on value rather than the cost. So you can't just look at the cost perspective and make a decision. And when you're doing that exercise, ServiceNow provides a complimentary business value assessment. They call it a BVA. Some sales rep will also do a mutual success plan. And on their website, they also have a value calculator to help determine what business value the product suites that you're considering and the money that you're going to spend is going to provide. And at times, this helps customers build a business case to justify the investment and get the necessary funding approval. When you're going through that exercise, like I said, customers should use their own judgment in evaluating the assumptions that are made for the analysis and are the basis for the model. ServiceNow generally sets a high bar in pricing for its products. So when you're looking at BMC, Avanti, they're going to be at a lower price point, but and assumes, that all of the products that ServiceNow will sell you are going to be used and are going to start, the SKUs are going to start implemented, and you're going to start seeing results. And at times, if you're, up for a renewal, there could be an explosion sort of in a contract terms and implementation complexity. So you want to kind of watch out for that. In terms of the uncertainty, for example, ServiceNow applications also have a shift in pricing models. So for example, ServiceNow GRC was a pre-product that you could have downloaded from the App Store a while ago. As the product gained features, popularity, and use, prices increased. Hardware and software asset management was part of ITSM. Again, with the Paris release, it became a standalone product, separately licensed. Field services, like I had mentioned earlier, was part of CSM, not licensed separately, but now it is a standalone product. So ServiceNow does not have a universal, if you will, or a standard platform license fee where you buy one and you sort of get it all, right? It's not an enterprise license deal for most customers, which creates a little bit of a confusion. And okay, you've got all of these different SKUs. What are the ones that you want to package and license for your implementation? That's the challenge. And it's difficult at times for customers to calculate the TCO based on the products, what value you're going to try to deliver in the phase one. So the transparency, if you will, from the licensing, the number of users that are going to need the license, the number of transactions you kind of estimate. And at times, you're also going to have to know the exact number of devices for ITOM SKU, for example, for infrastructure devices or elements that are going to be discovered. So those factors fall into the equations to create a very complex licensing deal. That results in an order form for product suites. ServiceNow for the bigger organization has a now buy-in program, and I double quote now buy-in program. It provides an enterprise SaaS agreement or ESA or an ELA. In previous phases, you might have heard of enterprise license agreements. So that's how I think of it. And that provides a little bit more flexibility at a higher price point for large customers. And when you're negotiating contracts for ServiceNow, you want to be very cognizant of terms and conditions because they are pretty rigid. And most customers would say they're one-sided, and not exactly customer friendly. And some of those terms and conditions that you want to kind of focus on when you're purchasing ServiceNow is related to the cost estimates that they provide, the name of the software products that they provide, the description of the functionality, the different licensing type. Is it per site, per name user? They don't have a concurrent user. Is it per server? Then you're also going to want to talk about the licensing term, for example, perpetual, annual. You're also going to have to consider unit pricing, transaction pricing, the quantity, for example, of number of approvers or stakeholders, number of fulfillers. All of those factors is going to sum up into a total purchase price. And then you're going to have these one-off pricing, for example, for folks that are going to need additional training, folks that are going to need to go to the knowledge conference, et cetera. So that'll be your total cost plus implementation. So that's the pricing. And then I want to kind of now talk about some recommendations. The way you can kind of work through the challenges of pricing is by leading with a budget-centric sort of position that says, hey, we have funding for X, and then, we really need to have this as a phase one, and then use that as your sort of leverage. The other leverage that you can avoid is having an internal exercise of, all of the product SKUs that are going to be needed, as well as customer, step in for the licensing. So for the phase one implementation. And if I've heard and have other, sort of people say this, I've not been in it in myself, but you can have some contractual sort of, guards, if you will, or rails around governing future spend, where, there's only an X% escalation at renewal. You can also avoid a captive state by saying, okay, if we negotiate early, if your licensing is up at the end of the 2020, for example, ServiceNow will have end of the quarter, end of the year kind of promotions for people that'll renew earlier and re-up for another term. And you can use their fiscal calendar again as a leverage for negotiating maybe more favorable terms. ServiceNow pricing strategy also includes tying licenses cost to value. That might be your biggest leverage, that, okay, we're expecting this value and this is our budget for that value, and use that as a negotiation for discounts that you can get on the list price or rates that are sort of set as a base for product SKUs. And your budget, if you're already budgeted, and if you can accept the cost for the business problems that you're solving, and marrying those solutions or needs that are going to be needed for solving those business problems with product SKUs. And if you can show your roadmap, show how those products are going to be phased in, and knowing, if ServiceNow knowing that, this is what you've been budgeted, and that'll kind of drive your business and buying decisions, ServiceNow, I've seen they'll work with you. And if you're at a point where negotiations sort of are, unsuccessful, you have the choice to escalate. If pricing and licensing are truly, sort of things that are going to be a sticky point and a roadblock for your organization, you can execute to a higher leadership, either in your organization, or have that leader reach out to senior leadership in ServiceNow with focus on business outcome type of conversation versus just the pricing conversation. I've already mentioned that, ServiceNow will work with you and honor pricing that have been set at renewals. And if you do get lucky, and if certain products are grandfathered at your renewals, you can use that as a leverage. Like, for example, if FSM was a product that you purchase under CSM, ServiceNow would not generally hit you up, for another SKU, another licensing cost. If those type of changes, if you're lucky to have them sort of grandfathered under your existing contracts. They also have a custom built application sort of licensing. So if you're doing a B2B or a B2C type of additional, custom built scope apps, you'd want to be conscious of that. If you're going to expand the base tables and create a bunch of custom tables, you'll have a licensing. We talked about the integration hub and password reset. Again, you want to be conscious of the number of transactions that you're going to have. Most times, in my opinion, when ServiceNow is purchased, people overlook the value of, attending conferences, having people trained, having adequate credits for additional sort of things that you would need in your overall licensing. So make sure you kind of are conscious of not only licensing, but other sort of bolt-on expenses that come with the licensing. And then I'm going to kind of move on from licensing if nobody else has any questions, because this is probably my most important slide for the presentation. The next thing, once you sort of make your mind that you've purchased ServiceNow licensing, is building out the team. And obviously you're going to want to, for a ServiceNow platform, point of contact that's your sort of product owner, that be a your single point of contact to communicate with your vendors. That's ServiceNow, the product, manufacturer, if you will, or the tool provider, as well as the people that you hire for your implementation. You're also going to want to make sure that the workload that is going to be required for the various stages of the project and the people that are going to have to participate in those exercises, that they have real estate, like 20% of their sort of schedule, for example, is available for a ServiceNow project, or whatever that percent is, depending on the role. You also want to talk about and be conscious of how ServiceNow's partners generally work with SDLC and Agile methodology in delivering these projects, and how that would work in your organization. And again, the tools that are leveraged during those phases. You need to identify what your team's core strengths are, and how your partners are going to enable you and provide sort of cross training, or teach you to fish kind of a mentality as the implementation configuration is going on, so you're in position to take over and maintain and sustain the platform going forward. Or you can work with a partner like GSI, where we have a managed services remote admin type of an offering, where you buy X number of hours a month, and all of the configuration, administration, platform upgrades are handled by a partner, and you don't have to have a very expensive resource internally dedicated for that work. And what the balance is with, is ServiceNow expertise that is brought from the ServiceNow community, what is considered good practice in either coding and in business with your team. So you want to kind of balance this with your managed service provider, your consulting group, and the resources in-house. So you have a juggling act. And when you're bringing on people to your team, you're going to have to figure out, what type of a role that they have, what type of training that they're going to have, they're going to need and take, that's diverted and sort of aligned to the product suites that you're implementing. And depending on if they're, going to be fundamental type of people, implementation or experts. And there's a very concise and clear training and roadmaps available on ServiceNow's website. So if you're in the ITSM suite, or security suite of products, or customer service, et cetera, the paths that are going, the training that's going to be needed, and the path that the person would take to get certified. And these certifications are pretty much on a release by release basis. So there is some training expense that you're going to have to kind of budget and be prepared for. So you want to train by role. You want to be very clear on the path and the skills alignment before you kick off the project, as well as during the various phases. And you want to make sure your resources are trained and certified. Any questions so far? Okay, continue on. Now, we've gone through the exercise of selecting ServiceNow, negotiating with ServiceNow, buying ServiceNow. It's time to pick a partner. And some of this could be a parallel exercise. When you're looking at your options, what I suggest is, in what we've seen is, you want to obviously get a ServiceNow certified partner that's demonstrated capabilities in the industry that you're in the product suite that you're deploying. And depending on the size of your organization, are you going to go and hire a global elite? These are the largest ServiceNow partners. And or are you okay with some of the smaller tiers that are going to be more approachable, more negotiable, and better aligned and kind of flex with your needs? So the level goes from highest to the lowest. And with every ServiceNow partner, they're ranked on a CSAT score for every implementation that they do. So at the end of the implementation, ServiceNow sends out a series of surveys to partners, with 0 being the highest, 0 being the lowest and 5 being the highest score. So you want to try to go for a partner that has a very high CSAT score, as well as industry and product competency. The other areas to consider is, if you're going to go through a process improvement initiative. So, most organizations are doing, if you will, a rip and replace of an outdated, antiquated, technologies that are at the end of life with a more modern platform like ServiceNow. And as that exercise, they want to improve their processes, they want to improve efficiency, productivity, et cetera. And it's not just, rip and replace of one tool to the next. So that exercise can be very beneficial depending on the partner that you pick. And for example, if you're going through a digital transformation, it's not just taking, and implementing a product, it's more to it than that. And the methodology, the models, the knowledge that they bring to that with that transformation can be very valuable to your organization. And when you're selecting a partner, you want to be very careful and negotiate how they're going to provide the training or knowledge transfer to your staff, the configuration that they're going to do, and how they will document that configuration. When you're negotiating the contracts, will it be a time and material or a fixed fee? Fixed fee will come at obviously a lower, you know, it depends. So I don't want to say actually, but you have the choice of negotiating the type of contracts here, and then depending on what kind of a strategy that you want to take. Do you want to bring in a vendor and have them be just the wrench turner, or would you want to take a more of a partner approach where everybody is vested on your behalf and to your success, and you're going to look for all of these sort of practical transformative type of benchmarks versus just the if you will, a dollars figure on the contract. And the things that I'd like to look for when I'm selecting a partner is the type of services that you're going to get from a consulting organization or a system integrator that you're going to pick. One is, for example, at the beginning of the project, the collateral that they're going to provide, the methodology that they'll bring, application and architecture type of design for both hardware and software. That's in scope for your project. You want to bring in pragmatic subject matter experts, or for example, in how do you manage the process, the data, the integrations. You also want to bring in application and interface configuration experts in terms of how does a service portal get designed, the UI, the interfaces, and what is the best employee experience. They will also have sort of templates for going through application testing, UAT, deployment methodologies, also on how you transition your support and maintenance work after you go live. And when you go through an upgrade, what assurance are you going to have that the work that was done during that implementation will not kind of turn into a roadblock because of some custom code and customization that kind of went overboard, that's going to cause you go from, for example, from Paris to Quebec for the next upgrade, and the training that goes with it during the implementation. Now we're basically, well, actually, I want to tell you one more thing. The challenges that sometimes that can come up when you have a partner is if you're looking at, so for example, if you're a managed service provider, for example, and if that's sort of your expertise and domain separation is in the scope of work, or if you're a customer-centric organization and CSM and having an external facing service portal and having an external service knowledge base, et cetera, and the design that goes with it. So those are very different implementations. So you want to look at past performances and avoid pitfalls. So I think having showcase and maybe customer reference calls will go a long way for you. Now, the next set of slides is basically looking at the implementation phases of ServiceNow. And we're going to go through the challenges and the recommendations for the 4 phases, if you will, at a high level. So going from planning to deploying to going live and going in the operations and improvement or sustainment mode. And the challenges that you see, or that organizations could have in deploying ServiceNow is, hey, we spent a lot of time and energy and resources, but how come we're having a very low adoption rate in the use of the tool? How is it that we don't have a clear process on what we're trying to accomplish in the implementation, because now organization has difference of opinion from one business unit to the next. You also have organization that kind of take for granted the effort or the time, resources, et cetera, that are required for the implementation. And sometimes you can have an organization assume, yeah, I'm going to have this, product go in, or a suite of products, and it's automatically going to, sort of fix my broken processes or inefficiencies in my organization. So those are challenges, and it's not always the case where things work out the way that they expect. So to protect yourself and your organization from those kind of situations, you want to make sure, if you have a poorly managed implementation, um, to keep preventing that, you want to encourage buy-in from stakeholders. So for example, in my case, we had a sort of center of excellence, and we created the business case and the wireframe diagrams and all these show me use cases as we go through, and we would bring in different stakeholders and we would train them, we would show them what we're doing and get their feedback. We make our updates and have status calls, large conference room kind of gatherings to show what has been developed after one or two sprints. And as you're going through the project, it'll make the stakeholders and your end sort of customers absorb that change and not have a large sort of rip and replace where you're cutting over and there's a big bang at the end of the tunnel. So that kind of lessens the shock or lessens the impact on the user, and they kind of are aware of the change and can absorb it more gradually. You can also schedule the deliverables and plan focus on a business value versus just the product deployment. You definitely want to limit the amount of customization that developers will do in ServiceNow, because it'll be very costly for the upgrades. And the goal is, you want to use the lean principle, trim the fat on your processes, and optimize and make them the most efficient as possible. And we encourage, when we're doing implementations, to have buy-in from ServiceNow for the process that involves IT, the business stakeholders. We provide the training. We manage the tool configuration and expectations. So, hey, why do you really need this change? What's the need for this? So we kind of put some guards and protection before customers kind of approve and stories for configuration. And the last step is just to kind of, like I said, optimize. So now I want to go through the 4 steps, if you will, at a high level of what an implementation phase would look like for a ServiceNow project from end to end. And as you're in to summarize, when we started the webinar, you engage the stakeholders, you get your sort of house in order with the team that's going to be implementing it, with a clear strategy with your partners, vendors. You train the users and the administrators, make sure your phase 1 is crystal clear on what products are in scope. You're crystal clear on, if you have a center of excellence, PMO, what those business stakeholders are, how they're involved in the implementation, and what expectations from PMO, architecture review boards, et cetera, are going to be incorporated in your planning and discovery stage before you have boots on the ground from your implementation partner. As you're preparing the kickoff for the project, ServiceNow partner will show up and will give you a bunch of collateral that'll be an intake guide for the process and the work that'll be to come during the configuration, the deployment of the products. You want to keep your processes, like I had said earlier, lean, teams engaged, have a very open, candid communications that show how the weekly status is. Is it, all lights green, everything is going, or do you want to turn that project into yellow state because you've got some roadblocks that need to be cleared, or are you going to put that in, red because you've got risks that are going to impede, the success of the project or could impede the success of the project. Minimize the customization, et cetera, that we had talked about. You want to include workflows, reports, permissions, dependencies when you're going through the UAT, and make sure that your staff test each story, approves it prior to development, and after configuration is completed, test it for all of these features and make sure that it's to your satisfaction before you mark it approved and closed. As you get close to your go live, your partners will make sure that everyone is trained. You can have a pre-go live sort of announcements, posters. ServiceNow has a tradition of having a go live cake where you bring different parts of the organization together, and they give you celebratory sort of gift articles, and there's a a big party, if you will, with the go live with and then after the go live, you want to make sure that the partner has some sort of a transition for working through some backlogs. You could use a managed services, or push that off to phase two, excuse me, where you work through defects and backlog. And what you don't want to do is have a go live and just kind of all work comes to a screeching halt. You want to try to keep that momentum as much as possible. And in that post go live phase, you want to continue to work with your partner that, hey, we've got phase one done. What are we looking at phase two? You definitely want to, as a post go live, document the lessons that have been learned. What are the efficiency, inefficiency, what are things that you want to adopt so you can learn from that, and use that for the follow-up phases, and make sure that the product and the process owners are given the product sort of things to monitor. So you've got the dashboards, reports, governance kind of model to continue to measure your success. ServiceNow already provides out of the box, if you will, support for all of the products. So you've got a 24/7, support via High, but our clients generally will, hire GSI for a managed services contract where we provide a subject matter expert who's already familiar with your environment and your instance to kind of maintain and sustain that. And the CSM and the account execs will kind of team with an internal person to provide the managed services. It's a contract or an offering that we call App Care. And that's very tailored, and we have different tiers depending on, the level of support that you would need. And it would be a 24/7 offering. And these are all of the kind of things that happens in different tiers. We have a standard, admin, and development. So as you go up, you get more sort of capabilities. And I wanted to share all of these links. If you click on any of them, it'll bring you to a site with these resources. So you have a customer success center, all of the ServiceNow product docs, the community site, developer instance, if you want to have a free instance of ServiceNow, if you will, to kick the tires, the link to the App Store that I had mentioned, the knowledge conference. This is the training site. If you're part of ServiceNow, you'll get invited to what's called a SNUG. That's a local users group for ServiceNow that'll happen sort of in, near your area, and it's usually hosted by one of the ServiceNow customers and generally sponsored by a partner. If you're in the life sciences, telco, banking, et cetera, you have special industry groups that you can meet with, and you get invited to those industry groups to discuss sort of things, specific to your industries and how ServiceNow can best support that, as well as partner in ServiceNow events, experiences, and webinars. As part of this webinar, our practice is offering a consulting service for 2 to 3 hours for people that are on the call. and you can contact Gene Landmesser at gene.landmesser@getgsi.com for that additional service. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Brittany.
Perfect, Keaton. Just give me 1 second and I will share my screen.
I'm trying to figure out the stop sharing screen button. I'm looking for it. There it is. Okay, all yours.
All right, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, with that being said, we're going to move on to our Q&A session. As of right now, I do not see any questions that have been submitted, but you still can do so if you just, your bar is at the top or the bottom of the screen, and there is a little like box that you can submit questions in. So we'll just, give a couple seconds for that. And while we're waiting for questions to come in, I'll cover up some upcoming events. You can check out our ERP Talk, which is a problem-solving forum where you can get your ServiceNow and other enterprise application questions answered, as well as contribute to others' questions. This is a really cool tool here. You guys should definitely check that out. You can keep up with us on social media. All of our handles are currently listed on the screen. You can see our most up-to-date posts on webcasts, events, industry insights, and so much more. Check out our educational resources. If you would like to sign up for any of our educational resources, you can do so through our resource center at getgsi.com. Click resources and events on the main menu, and then select the platform that you would like to receive updates for. And that's how you do this here. You go to the resources, events, ServiceNow, webcast, and then sign up here. And let me just check again and see if we have any questions.
I didn't see any. I was looking.
Okay. All right. Well, with that being said, we want to thank everyone for their time today. And if you do have any follow-up questions from this webcast, you can see Gene and Keaton's information here on the screen. And we hope that everyone has a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keaton.
Okay, bye.